Well, hello and welcome back to the Celebration Machine. My name's Pete and I'm your host. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you taking your time to come and spend a little bit of it with me. So, this episode is called Marry Them and Bury Them. And in my first episode, I mentioned that I'm a funeral celebrant as well as a commercial building operator and that I used to do marriages. And so, this episode, I wanted to give you a little background on what it is to be a celebrant of any kind just so you can understand a little bit more about me and what that means. Because sometimes people are like, why do you do that stuff? That's kind of weird, especially the funerals. So my cousin got married years and years ago, and they'll admit the officiant was not good. I didn't know what an officiant was. And for those of you that don't know what an officiant is, it's somebody who performs rituals or something a priest would do, weddings, funerals, that sort of thing, but there's no religious affiliation. It's non-denominational. You basically do what the client wants you to do. So if you want to have a medieval wedding, let's do a medieval wedding. If you want to do, you're only limited by your imagination and your own comfort. Somebody wanted to do a wedding I wasn't comfortable with, I'd say no. But bottom line, I've married all my friends for the most part. I'm 52 now. I started doing it in my mid to late 20s, I guess. Married, I don't know, hundreds of people, hundreds of couples, and it was fun. It was great. But then it got to a point where it just wasn't fun anymore. It takes a long time. It takes time out of your day, out of your life. And I personally find weddings stressful. Funerals are, okay, they're stressful in a different way. But weddings, well, let's face it, people break up and that sucks. You run into them. Hey, how's it going? We broke up. Okay, that sucks. But funerals, you never run into someone and go, hey, how's it going? Jerry came back from the dead. No, they're a one-time thing. So that's one of the reasons I enjoy them is that there's a permanence to them. Um, and and to be honest, we'll go into this more later, but when I'm doing a funeral, I'm very much in a flow state because you're combining death and public speaking, two very scary things for a lot of people. I like that space. I like the feeling of being on that edge. And because I'm also required to give the absolute best that I have to give. You're not allowed any days off. You can't phone it in when you're doing a funeral, especially a funeral. Weddings, I know I sound like a dickhead there, but you know what I mean? You can't phone it in. You are hired to manage an emotional situation in a very professional way so that other people can relax. Your job is to take that stress, focus it into forward moving, positive energy, and at least mitigate the chaos to the best of your abilities and then deliver, create and facilitate an experience for people so they can, I don't want to use the word enjoy, but I have been told that people have enjoyed my services. And again, I'm not trying to sell my services here. I'm just giving you perspective and trying to help you understand me as a person and why I do that sort of thing. So my cousin got married and they said, the officiant said they spoke French and I guess they didn't really speak French. And the way they did speak French, it was pretty rough. And I don't want to slam the person. We all have our bad days. Maybe it was a bad day, but I got I don't drink anymore. I don't party anymore. My highest excitement is coffee with my wife, who I love dearly. And we just love hanging out, talking about the stuff we're going to talk about on this channel. But anyway, it wasn't a great service, but didn't matter. We had a great time after at my place next door, big bonfire. And I got hammered and I was going on about how I could have done a better job. So my mother the next morning said, Hemingway always said, always do sober what you said you'd do drunk. And you were talking pretty big last night about being good at doing this sort of thing. And I think you'd be good at it. And of course, I went to a different party and I mentioned it to some friends and a couple of them were getting, they were engaged and they were like, yeah, man, you got to do it. You got to do it. You got to marry me. And that's how it started. And my first one, ironically enough, was in French. I live in the province of Quebec in Canada. Excuse me, I'm sick. And my first one was a French one. And I didn't know them and they were strangers, but I did it. And I pushed myself beyond my comfort zone and it was a good experience. And it was very dramatic and chaotic because we were waiting on the license and it was late and this guy was driving. They came last minute running in and everybody cheered and it was really chaotic and fun, but I liked it. I loved it for the same reason I like doing stand up in the handful of times I've done it, because you're on that razor's edge. I don't prepare anything. I have an idea of where I'm going and I go on stage and grab the mic and away we go, because it's fun to be on that edge into that flow state, as I talked about a bit in the last video. So did weddings for years, made tons of my friends. And then I got a call one day that a buddy of mine had a massive heart attack and died suddenly. And it was his brother that called me and he said, he passed away suddenly and we don't know what to do. We're not religious. Would you do the funeral? And at the time, my family, my mom and dad were running a retreat center, and it was just this old property, and different religious groups would come up again, non-denominational. It was a really cool place called Temple Pastures, and the Anglican Church owned it. And my parents were retired, and they wanted something to do, and they did that. And it was an amazing place. They were there for 15 years. It was wonderful. We had awesome times, and there was an old barn that was turned into a chapel. Consequently, the same chapel that my cousin had gotten married in. So we decided we were going to do it up there, and I had no clue what I was doing. I was terrified. I'm not going to lie. I was scared, man, because if there's one thing you don't want to screw up, it's somebody's funeral. And it wasn't about public speaking. I'm very comfortable in front of crowds. I've been a musician since I was 14. I played tons of shows, hundreds, if not, maybe 1,000 shows, a lot of shows. And I'm very comfortable in front of a crowd. I'm very comfortable with a microphone in front of me and running all that sort of thing. But a funeral, especially your first one, I was scared because it wasn't about embarrassing myself because whatever, I do it daily. My wife will tell you, but it was because I didn't want to disappoint the family. You know, they're already suffering this loss. They're devastated. He was a young guy. I think he was like 40. We weren't that old. I know you young guys are like, "Oh, that's old," but really in the scope of things, you die at 40, that's not old. And I didn't want to make a situation that was tough worse. So I said to them, we had breakfast together and I said, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to try and figure out a framework. I need to know, what your vision of it is. I bit my tongue and I want you to know how you want it to feel. So we discussed that and we talked on the phone and we kind of came up with this idea and to this day, I've been doing funerals for over a decade, and that one was still probably my favorite, to be honest. Because there was no rules, it was incredible. I get goosebumps thinking about it because, well, number one, I was scared and I faced my own fear and I got through that. And anyone that does that, you know how it feels. It feels amazing when you're scared shitless and you do it anyway. And even if it goes badly, just doing it, uh, is huge. And I think that if you get to do that and do stuff that scares you, providing you're not going to hurt yourself or, get into real trouble, do it. Whether it's talking to someone you're scared to talk to or asking someone out or whatever it is, asking for promotion, whatever it is, push yourself, do it. So, number one, I felt great that I didn't, shit the proverbial bed. And even the way it started, they brought in my friend's ashes. They held his urn up, his sister, his little baby sister. I mean, she was an adult, but his youngest sibling, she walked in holding it, holding his remains, in this urn above her head. And everyone just stood up and we all just started chanting his name. Like, I don't even know how it started. We just all started chanting his name as she's walking in, holding it, you know, above her head. And he was a gardener and was into like Chinese medicine and stuff. So the altar of this space was covered in fresh vegetables and flowers, and it was powerful. And there were some candles, and we had music for when we walked in. And so I'm standing at the front, and they come in and they're chanting his name, and everyone sits down. So right away, I was like, well, that was powerful. People were already crying and they were releasing all this tension and energy. And already it was a legit celebration because, you got funerals, which are traditional, and then celebrations of life, which is typically not traditional. There's no usually a priest involved. It's not an infomercial for Christianity or Jesus Christ or, two things I have no problem with, but I'm just saying, you go to a Catholic funeral, they say the deceased name like a handful of times, and then it's all about, JC and the gang. So no disrespect intended, but that's not what I do. Obviously, I'm not a priest. I'm a celebrant. So, or an officiant, whatever you want to call it. So anyways, back to the funeral. It was amazing. And we had a beautiful service and I had kind of an open mic. I knew I had to control the time, but people just came up and spoke about, my buddy and how they made him feel. And it was so heartfelt and it was so honest and it was so powerful. And I just couldn't believe that I got to be a part of it, let alone run the thing. And his father had said, like, I can't speak. And And I remember I sat with him and I said, man, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you know, we're all going to go to bed that night after the service. And when you put your head on that pillow, I want you to think about how you're going to feel if you don't say anything and how you're going to feel if you do. Because most people, obviously, when a father's eulogizing his son, that's a hard thing to do. That's not the way it's supposed to be. You're not supposed to die before your kid. And when people are put in that position, man, nobody wants to be up there exposing themselves. Again, death, public speaking, vulnerability. You're already a mess because you lost one of your children, and I'll never judge somebody who goes through that in any way, shape, or form, but I will encourage them to get up and speak and say something, even if you fall apart, because you're only going to be in that position once, right? You're only going to get that opportunity once. And I don't want anybody that hires me to come to me and say, why didn't you push me? Why didn't you ask me to do, to speak? So now I'm always telling the same speech, like, you're going to go to bed that night and you're going to think about what you did or didn't do. And I don't care if you fall down on your face or pass out. I'll literally catch you. I'm a big dude. I will catch you. We will wake you up and you can try again. And if then you can't do it, all right, you tried. So I always encourage people to try. And I'm going to do a video about eulogies and, for people that have to present them, because you don't see a lot of content around that. So I will do a video about that. But anyways, that first funeral was amazing. And his father did speak. And I said, just give me a look if you want to come up. And eventually after, a couple of people had spoken, he kind of looked at me and he came up and I stood with him. He said, stay with me. And I did. And he spoke about his son, and it was powerful, man. It was beautiful. I mean, it was painful and it hurt, and it was, I don't want to say it was awful, because it was beautiful. Uh, and it was powerful, man. And he was, weeping by the end of it, and everybody was, and it was, but there was a lot of joy there, because when you get past that initial grief and that pain, and your heart speaks to, how a person made you feel, oh, that's some good stuff. That's what we're here to do. And after a decade of funerals, like I tell people, it's how you make people feel. Like, if there's one thing I know about life, if there's one thing you get from this channel, it's this. It's all about how you make people feel. Period. At the end of the day, nobody gives a shit about many more things than how you made them feel. People show up at your funeral because they loved you or they hated you and they're happy to see you go, or they're in the will, or a combination of those things. But most times it's because they're there because you made an impact on them, and you made them feel a certain way, and you want to go pay respects because you're going to miss that. So that's how I got into doing funerals. I segued out of weddings into funerals, and I called the episode Marry Them and Bury Them because, again, I had another friend and I did his wedding, and at his wedding, he was hammered. We all were. That's back when I drank and partied and everything. And he put his arm around me and he said, this guy right here, man, he married me today. I love this dude. I love Petey. He married me. And you know what? God damn it. One day he's going to bury me. And we all laughed, ha ha ha. Great day, wedding. Everyone's feeling good. Years later, I get a phone call from his wife that he hung himself. He took his own life. And it was awful, of course. And the first thing I thought of is, my buddy with his arm around me saying, he married me today, and one day this motherfucker's gonna bury me, And and here we were. So that was pretty crazy and pretty tough. Suicides are always hard. There's a lot of stigma around it, which is another reason why I want to, have this channel and talk about stuff like that, because I've seen a lot of suffering and unnecessary suffering based on stigma, based on what people think, and just people that are torturing themselves with their own idea of how they should feel. And it's awful. Oh, that'll be something we also get into. But anyway, so yeah, that's how I became a funeral celebrant. And I've been doing it, like I said, over 10 years. And I've had a lot of crazy experiences, a lot of powerful experiences. And every time I do it, I feel very alive and very much in a flow state, because you're completely present. And there's very few places in life where you get to actually be completely present. And usually it's in a high anxiety state, or your life's in danger. You're very present. You're very focused. And although my life's not in danger when I'm doing that, I feel like something important is on the line when I'm doing a funeral for somebody. I really feel like it's an important thing to deliver correctly, as you can imagine. So I'm going on a little bit here. It's this long video. I want to try and keep around, 10, 15 minutes. But anyways, that's how I became an officiant. That's how I became the celebration machine. And I continue to do it. I no longer do weddings, but I only do, funerals now, celebrations of life, because they mean a lot more to me and they're powerful. And I believe they're very necessary. And again, more videos coming about, funerals and rituals and grief and all that kind of stuff, and also aliens and psychic stuff, and the way the world's going. But anyways, yeah, welcome to the channel, and I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope that helps you understand who I am a little bit more. If you have any questions or comments, do your thing. And yeah, that's about it. Marry them and bury them. I'll never forget my buddy Scotty. I don't want to use people's names, but Scotty was a rig. He was a good fella, and I miss him. A lot of people do. So anyway, that's that for that. You guys have a wonderful day. Hope to see you again. Until, bye for now.